Do you really think someone like you could ever save lives? Chase's mocking laugh echoed through the courtyard of Lincoln Middle School as Ethan stood frozen, clutching his notebook against his chest, eyes brimming with tears. Born without his right hand, the dream of becoming a firefighter sounded to many like a cruel joke. But to Ethan, it wasn't just a dream. It was a way to prove that his disability didn't define him. What those kids never imagined was that, not too far into the future, they would desperately need the courage of the same boy they once laughed at. Before we dive into this true and powerful story, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from in the United States and hit that like button to support our work. And if you're not part of our community yet, make sure to subscribe now and join us. In the quiet little town of Cedar Glen, nestled deep in the heart of Montana, Ethan learned early on what it meant to be different. Since he was 8 years old, he had been the target of whispers, mean jokes, and snickering in school hallways. Born with a congenital condition that left him without one hand, Ethan had a dream that most people thought was ridiculous: becoming a firefighter. He was fascinated by rescue missions he saw on the news or in special TV programs and would picture himself wearing that red uniform, helping people, making a real difference. But every time he said that out loud in class, the laughter would erupt. One of the loudest voices came from Chase, the classic popular kid, the ringleader of the group, who made a point of reminding Ethan of his limitations any chance he got. To Chase, the idea of someone like Ethan riding in a fire truck was as silly as believing in comic book superheroes, pure childish nonsense. Despite all that, Ethan had something priceless at home: the unconditional love of his mother, Karen, a strong woman who worked the front counter of a laundromat and took in sewing at night just to keep the two of them afloat. "Son, sometimes God allows battles so he can build strength where the world only sees weakness," she'd say gently, stitching near the window. But even with that love, the hurt from school was heavy on Ethan's heart. One moment stuck with him forever. He was just 10 years old during a school assembly where each student was asked to share what they wanted to be when they grew up. When Ethan's turn came, he stood up, his voice shaky, and said, "I want to be a firefighter." But before he could finish, Chase burst out laughing. "With what? Your little stump to hold the hose?" he shouted, sending the audience into cruel laughter. Ethan froze. His cheeks burned with shame. That night he went to bed without dinner, holding a pillow soaked in tears. After that incident, the school's PE teacher, Mr. Turner, noticed something different in Ethan's eyes, a quiet sadness, and decided to step in. He suggested Ethan try swimming at the town's community center, where a free program was available. The idea terrified Ethan. He was already bullied enough, and the thought of being seen in a swim brief, exposed, was too much. But Mr. Turner's words were kind and honest. "In the water, Ethan, gravity can't touch you. It's like flying." That first plunge into the cold water felt like hitting another wall. But as he started to move across the pool, something remarkable happened. He felt weightless. He didn't need a second hand to slice through the tiled lane beneath him with strength and elegance. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly free. Little by little, swim practice became the highlight of his week. The taunts didn't hit the same anymore. Because with each lap, he was getting closer to a version of himself he could finally respect. The pool became his refuge, his place of power, a space with no cruel laughter, only effort and triumph. One afternoon, after a long and exhausting workout, Coach Williams walked over with a serious tone. "You've got something rare, Ethan. Courage. Most people quit before they even try, but not you." Those words hit deep. For the first time, Ethan saw himself through someone else's eyes. Not as the kid who was different, but as someone who had value, grit, and a future. Even though the teasing and challenges didn't vanish overnight, something inside him had shifted. With every stroke, Ethan was learning that the hardest battle in life isn't silencing the voices around you, it's overcoming the fear within. By the time Ethan was 14, he had become a familiar face at the Cedar Glen Community Center. Swim training wasn't just making him stronger physically, it was slowly rebuilding something deeper: his self-esteem. Coach Williams, his swim coach, watched each bit of progress with quiet pride. But at school, things were still tough. Some classmates refused to acknowledge his dedication, mocking every small achievement he fought so hard to earn. "A champion with one arm? You've got to be kidding," Chase would say, with that same smirk, always ready to tear down anything Ethan built. But despite the constant verbal jabs, Ethan clung to swimming like a life raft in open water. His mornings were spent in the classroom, and every afternoon he threw himself into the pool with the discipline and focus of a true athlete. And the results began to show. His times improved, his endurance grew, and his technique became sharper. Coach Williams couldn't hide the pride in his eyes. One late afternoon, after a tough workout, the coach gathered the group of young swimmers. "We've got a regional meet coming up in a few months," he announced. Ethan's heart raced. He took a deep breath and asked, "Do you think I have a shot at competing, Coach?" Without skipping a beat, the coach placed a hand on his shoulder and said firmly, "You've got everything it takes to represent Cedar Glen." From that moment on, Ethan's focus reached a whole new level. His training intensified, and his commitment became even more visible. He started arriving early, adjusted his diet, and even practiced race strategies in his mind before bed. The teasing at school continued, but it no longer echoed the same way. Ethan had come to realize he didn't need everyone's approval, just the courage to keep going. A week before the tournament, word of his participation began to spread around town. People congratulated him at the grocery store, at the diner, and even after Sunday service. But at school, skepticism still lingered. "This is going to be a joke," Chase scoffed. "He's going to drown halfway through the race." Then the big day came. The sports complex in Great Falls was packed with families, coaches, and competitors from small towns across Montana. Ethan barely slept the night before. His stomach churned with nerves, but the moment he put on the handmade blue uniform his mom, Karen, had sewn for him, he felt protected. Standing beside the pool, Coach Williams gave him a quick thumbs up, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. The whistle blew. Ethan dove in with precision. The cold, heavy water melted away as he swam. Every stroke was a declaration. He was here, not out of pity or charity, but because he had earned it. Midway through the race, his shoulder began to burn, but he didn't slow down. He thought about the years of cruel laughter, the quiet afternoons spent training, his mother's unwavering faith, and he pushed forward. When his hand touched the final wall, it took him a moment to register the applause. He had finished in second place. A silver medal now hung from his neck, but what he carried in his heart weighed far more than any trophy. He had won, not over the others, but over doubt, over shame, over the fear that once kept him small. Coach Williams wrapped him in a hug. "You were brilliant, Ethan. Never forget who you are." As the crowd cheered, Chase stood at a distance. He tried to laugh it off with his usual smugness, but for the first time, he didn't seem convinced by his own mockery. Something had shifted, maybe not completely, but enough to put a crack in his arrogance. After that competition, Ethan's connection to swimming deepened. He was no longer training just for himself. He now carried a new mission, to show other kids with disabilities that their dreams are valid. That courage doesn't mean having no limits. It means being willing to push past them. The silver medal was just the beginning. At school, the change was subtle but real. Some classmates who used to mock him now looked at him with respect. Others still chuckled behind his back. But Ethan didn't flinch. His eyes were set on the future. His new goal was even bolder, to become a professional athlete. His mother, waiting at the front door with teary eyes, knew this wasn't just a win. It was the birth of something greater. That night, as Ethan lay in bed with his medal hanging from the lamp beside him, he smiled. He thought about all the days he nearly gave up, and how, against all odds, he had chosen to keep going. There was still a long road ahead, but he was ready. By the time Ethan turned 16, he was starting to reap the rewards of his relentless dedication to swimming. Ever since he had won the silver medal at the regional meet, his name was no longer a punchline. It had become a symbol of respect in Cedar Glen. The boy once underestimated had become a living example of determination. But along with recognition came new challenges, and an emotional weight he wasn't quite ready for. That's when the news broke. There would be a statewide qualifying event to build Montana's junior Paralympic team, and Ethan's name was on the short list. For a moment, he couldn't believe what he was reading. "Me? Compete at the state level? It felt distant, almost unreal. But behind the rush of excitement, a darker feeling crept in. Doubt. What if he wasn't good enough? What if he failed in front of everyone now rooting for him? One quiet afternoon during practice, Coach Williams noticed the uneasiness in Ethan's eyes. He sat down by the pool and, with the patience of someone who'd seen many young talents stumble under pressure, said, "You know, Ethan, some people just aren't ready to take that next step, but you're not like them. Not because of medals, but because you never stopped trying." Ethan, clearly shaken, looked at his coach and finally let it out. "What if I fail? Everyone expects me to win now. I don't want to be a disappointment." Coach Williams gave a calm smile and squeezed his shoulder. Winning isn't just about stepping onto a podium. Sometimes winning is simply having the courage to dive in, even when you're scared. Don't let fear decide your worth. Still, the anxiety lingered. At school, word of his selection began to spread through the hallways, and with it, the old ghosts came crawling back. "The half-arm champ is going to embarrass us at state," Chase barked, as unfiltered as ever, trying once again to tear down Ethan's achievement. But something had shifted. This time, Ethan didn't react. The words, though cruel, didn't sting like before. He'd come to understand that his fight was bigger and far more meaningful than the need to silence the mockery. Still, the wound wasn't entirely healed. One morning, arriving at school, he found his locker vandalized with red spray paint. "Half-arm champ" and "You'll never be a real athlete." The impact was immediate. It hit him like a punch to the chest. At the next practice, Ethan was distant, off his rhythm. Coach Williams, always observant, pulled him aside. "I saw the locker, Ethan, and I know it hurts. But listen, being great doesn't mean never falling. It means getting back up every time they try to knock you down." In that quiet locker room, something clicked. Ethan realized his real battle wasn't with bullies or even the pressure. It was with the insecurity that still whispered inside his mind. He made a choice. This time, fear wouldn't win. And if he failed, he'd go down, giving it everything he had. On the day of the state trials, the arena in Billings was buzzing. Athletes from all over the region warmed up with precision and focus. Ethan looked around, overwhelmed by how seasoned the other competitors seemed. But beside him, Coach Williams did what he always did, locked eyes with him and said with a half smile, "You've already beaten your biggest opponent, Ethan. Believing you belonged here." The whistle blew. Ethan dove in. That morning the water felt heavier than usual. Every meter took more effort, more focus. But he didn't back down. He thought of his mother, Karen, who had stayed up the night before stitching his uniform. He thought of every time someone called him weak. He thought of the boy who used to cry quietly in his room. And he swam. He swam like the future depended on it. When he touched the final wall, the applause caught him off guard. He stood still for a moment, trying to process it. The scoreboard confirmed it. He'd made the team. He was officially part of the state squad. Coach Williams wrapped him in a hug, words catching in his throat. "You made history, Ethan. Never doubt who you are again." The news spread fast across Cedar Glen. Many who once mocked him now shared in the pride of his achievement. And Chase? He didn't mock. He didn't congratulate. He just stood there, quiet, swallowing the bitter truth of watching Ethan become a local hero. In the days that followed, Ethan realized he hadn't just earned a spot on the team. He had changed the way he saw himself. The coach's words echoed in his mind like a mantra. A true champion is the one who faces the fear of not being enough. Now, more than ever, Ethan understood that his greatest victory hadn't happened in the pool. It had happened within, in the quiet, unwavering courage to keep going, even when the world said it wasn't worth it. After earning his long-dreamed spot on the state team, Ethan felt a bittersweet mix of pride and pressure. The silver medal had opened doors for him, but it also brought a weight he hadn't anticipated. He was no longer just the determined kid training at the community center. He was now Cedar Glen's official representative. And with that title came the pressure to live up to expectations. During the following practices, Coach Williams quickly noticed something had changed. Ethan's strokes had lost their usual strength, and the focused spark in his eyes had faded into something distant. One gray, rainy afternoon, the coach called him over for a quiet conversation beside the empty pool. "What's going on, kid? You look like you're fighting something that's not in the water. Ethan sighed, trying to find the words. Before, it was just about proving I could swim. Now it feels like I'm carrying the whole town on my back. What if I mess up? What if I let down everyone who believes in me? Coach Williams listened patiently, then replied with steady calm. You didn't get here because of other people's expectations. You made it because of your drive to push your own limits. That's what really matters. The conversation brought some relief, but the inner weight lingered. At school, many classmates who once ignored him now treated him with respect, but not everyone was willing to accept his rise. Chase, for example, remained silent whenever Ethan's name came up, a silence that said more than any insult. Then, an old wound reopened. Arriving at practice one afternoon, Ethan found his locker vandalized again. Spray-painted across the door were the words, "Half-arm champ," along with a cruel, childish drawing. His chest tightened. That old feeling of being small, unwanted, it came rushing back. But this time, he took a deep breath and didn't let it break him. He simply closed the locker, changed into his gear, and walked straight to the pool. When Coach Williams heard about it, he came over right away. You want me to talk to the principal? Ethan shook his head, steady. No need. I've been through worse. This won't stop me. The coach smiled subtly, recognizing the maturity blooming in him. Word spread quickly through the school halls, and even some students who used to be indifferent started speaking out. A few, even friends of Chase, said it had gone too far. Ethan didn't accuse anyone, but deep down, he knew the shadow of insecurity still hovered. During history class, a classmate who often hung around with Chase approached him quietly. Hey, I don't know for sure, but I heard Chase say something about the locker yesterday. He might know more than he's letting on. Ethan just nodded, but the thought echoed in his mind the rest of the day. That night, while organizing his training gear at home, his mom, Karen, noticed how unsettled he was. Everything okay, honey? Ethan hesitated before answering. It's just, sometimes I feel like no matter what I do, someone's always going to try to bring me down. With the quiet strength of someone who's lived through her own battles, Karen replied gently. People don't always know how to handle it when someone breaks the mold, but you're not here to please anyone, Ethan. Your victory is not letting other people's cruelty harden your heart. Her words were like a balm. At the next practice, Ethan dove in with a renewed sense of purpose. The water, once heavy with pressure, now felt familiar, almost like home. Coach Williams noticed the difference and walked over with a quiet nod. You're not just training to swim anymore. You're giving an entire town something to believe in. Don't forget that. Still, the tension between Ethan and Chase lingered. Some students noticed how Chase avoided even looking in Ethan's direction, how his discomfort grew with each compliment Ethan received. Ethan, however, chose not to confront. He focused on his training, on the bigger goals ahead. One day, during warm-ups, Ethan spotted Chase sitting alone in the bleachers, staring at the water. For the first time, Ethan didn't see mockery in his expression, but something more like regret, or maybe confusion. Still, Ethan looked away and went back to his laps. This wasn't the time for showdowns. It was time to stay focused. The state championship was approaching fast, and Ethan knew he had to stay centered. The whole town was behind him now, even if the occasional taunt still surfaced. What mattered most was keeping his purpose clear. And then, something unexpected happened. After a special training session with the rest of the state team, Ethan opened his locker to find a small note taped inside. Keep swimming. You're an inspiration. He looked around, curious to see who might have left it, but no one stepped forward. A small smile tugged at his lips. Maybe the world was finally starting, little by little, to see past what he was missing and start recognizing everything he had in abundance. At 17, with the national competition on the horizon, Ethan felt he was about to dive into the most challenging chapter of his journey yet. The pressure was still there, but it now came with a different weight, responsibility. He wasn't swimming just for himself anymore. He swam for everyone who had placed their hopes in his courage, for every word of support he had received, and for every child who saw him as a symbol of possibility. Coach Williams remained by his side at every practice, watching every technical detail, refining his strokes, pushing focus and precision. Support in Cedar Glen was tangible. People who once dismissed his dreams now followed his updates with pride. The local radio station invited him for a special interview. During the live broadcast, Ethan spoke about his tough childhood, overcoming his disability, and how swimming had changed his life. With every message sent in by listeners, the studio swelled with emotion. Parents, children, veterans, all felt moved by his strength. Ethan had to hold back tears more than once. For the first time, he was truly grasping the real impact of his story. Meanwhile, Chase kept the same distant stance. No praise, no criticism, just silence. In his narrow view, nothing changed the fact that, to him, Ethan had simply gotten lucky. Coach Williams intensified the training regimen. Physical prep ramped up week by week. Endurance, explosiveness, pace. We're working with specific goals now. Every session will be a new obstacle, and you're going to overcome all of them, the coach said. Ethan took on each challenge with his usual grit. His body ached, but his mind had never been stronger. Between practices, the community center organized small sessions where Ethan would speak to groups of local kids. He shared his journey, talked about resilience, and showed that swimming wasn't just a sport, it was a symbol of transformation. During one of those talks, a little girl named Sophie, born without one hand, approached him and asked, "Did you ever think about giving up?" Ethan knelt down in front of her and answered with a calm smile, "Many times, Sophie. But every time I thought about it, I remembered that each stroke brought me a little closer to my dreams, and that was stronger than the urge to stop." That moment with Sophie brought tears to many eyes. His mother, Karen, watched from a distance, eyes glassy with emotion, seeing how her son had become a beacon for so many lives. Even with his emotional strength growing, Ethan knew he still had room to improve technically. So Coach Williams took him to Bozeman, where there was an Olympic-sized pool and a high-performance training center. At first, the new environment felt overwhelming. More experienced swimmers, curious glances, an intense pace. But Ethan quickly adapted. Facing tougher opponents and training in more demanding conditions pushed him to the next level. One calm night at the training facility, Ethan and Coach Williams sat down to talk about what lay ahead. "Not everyone handles pressure well, Ethan. But you've got something rare, the guts to face your own fears." Ethan sat in thoughtful silence. He knew that no matter what happened in the competition, his greatest victory had already taken place, within. Back in Cedar Glen, excitement was building. The town was getting ready to follow the national meet closely. At a team gathering at the community center, Coach Williams gave a short speech. "Ethan showed us that perseverance isn't a myth. It's a daily choice. Let's carry that with us in everything we do." The night before the trip, Ethan was caught off guard by a tribute in the town square. Banners with messages of encouragement hung from trees, photos of him decorated a makeshift stage, and hundreds of people gathered to celebrate. Amid the applause, Karen was invited to the stage. "My son used to want to be a firefighter when he was little. Today, he saves lives in a different way, by inspiring each of us to believe we're capable." Ethan couldn't hold back the tears. When handed the microphone, he spoke only a few words, but from the heart. "I only made it this far because I was never alone. Every bit of support, every kind word, was a step on this path. Thank you for believing in me." The next morning, before boarding the bus, Ethan stopped by Coach Williams's house. The coach pulled him into a firm hug. "Trust yourself, kid. Swim like it's your last shot. Not for the result, but for the chance to show the world what's in your heart." Ethan took a deep breath, grateful, taking in every word. As the bus rolled down the highway, Ethan stared out the window, replaying every setback, every quiet victory, every moment he nearly gave up. This wasn't a story about winning medals. It was about beating the odds, beating himself. Arriving in the capital, the aquatic center took his breath away. It was massive, pristine, intimidating, but instead of shrinking back, he felt inspired. The building made him feel small, but the road he'd traveled made him feel enormous. In that pool, he wouldn't just swim. Every stroke would tell his story. And Ethan was ready to make it the most unforgettable one of all. Arriving in the state capital for the national competition felt, to Ethan, like stepping through a portal. His heart raced, a rush of nerves, excitement, and anticipation. The Helena Aquatic Center was massive, Olympic-sized pools lit by powerful beams, towering bleachers, and elite athletes moving with effortless confidence. Ethan felt small in the face of it all, but took deep breaths, staying grounded in the reason he'd made it this far: his willpower. During warm-ups, he discreetly watched the other swimmers. Many were already well-known. They had titles, social media followings, and a near-professional air. From the far corner of the pool, Ethan caught part of a conversation from a group of athletes. "That's the kid with the disability. They say he's good, but let's see if he really is." He pretended not to hear it, but the words hit like stones. Later that night, back at the dorm, insecurity crept in. He lay in silence, staring at the ceiling. Do I really deserve to be here? Before falling asleep, he checked his phone and found a voice message from his mom, Karen. "Son, don't forget what you're capable of. You earned your place with grit and heart. That alone is already a victory. Swim with everything you've got, and everything will be okay." Her words reconnected him with the journey behind him, and he drifted off to sleep holding his phone tight. The next morning, as he was preparing for the qualifying round, a staff coordinator called him aside. There had been an anonymous report filed against him, accusing him of using banned supplements. Ethan was stunned. "But that's not true. I've never taken anything. Never." Around him, glances turned skeptical. Whispers filled the hallway. Coach Williams stood beside him, calm and resolute. "We'll get to the bottom of this. You know who you are. Stay focused." A few hours later, an anonymous message reached Coach Williams' phone. Chase told some swimmers from another team that Ethan was using supplements. It happened yesterday in the locker room. The coach read it, swallowed hard, and decided not to tell Ethan. Not yet. The priority was protecting him from an emotional spiral. The hours that followed were heavy and tense. Ethan felt like his world was collapsing. Why would someone make this up? What are they trying to take from me? That night, he sat by the edge of the dark, empty pool. Coach Williams joined him in silence, then finally spoke. "Kid, when you shine, there will always be someone trying to dim your light. But truth has power, and it always comes through." The next day, competition officials announced the outcome of their investigation. The accusation was unfounded. No trace of banned substances had been found. Relief. A deep, cleansing relief. But the internal wounds remained. Ethan returned to training more determined, even if his heart was still bruised. Why would anyone do that? He kept asking himself. News spread quickly in Cedar Glen. The community responded with outrage. Many defended Ethan publicly, though some skeptics still muttered that he got off easy because he's protected. Chase, for his part, said nothing, but something in his expression had shifted. Maybe it was guilt, maybe regret. At the next practice, Ethan made a decision to protect his peace. He tuned out the noise and dove into the water like nothing else mattered. Coach Williams noticed the fire in his eyes. "That's it, kid. It's not about what they say. It's about moving forward, especially when they try to stop you. That's when you show them who you really are." The day of the competition arrived. Ethan stepped onto the starting block, his muscles tense, his spirit calm. The signal sounded. He dove in hard, slicing through the water with precision. Every stroke was an answer, not with words, but with action. When he hit the final wall, his eyes darted to the scoreboard. First place. Silence. Then, a thunder of applause. Coach Williams ran to him, arms wide. "You didn't just win a race. You beat everything they tried to make you believe." As he caught his breath, Ethan looked to the stands and saw Chase. For the first time, there was no mockery in his gaze, no anger, just something softer. He dropped his eyes, uncomfortable, saying nothing, and Ethan understood. Sometimes silence is where remorse lives. Later that day, in the sports center courtyard, athletes who had once looked down on him came over to shake his hand. One stepped forward. "Hey, I'm sorry. I doubted you. But today, you showed us what a real athlete looks like." Ethan smiled. He knew that sometimes respect is harder to earn than medals. In the days that followed, the false accusation was still a topic of conversation. The source was never officially confirmed, but Ethan chose not to dwell on that. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the future, on training, on the kids who now looked up to him. Until one day, during warm-ups, Chase walked over. He was alone and clearly uncomfortable. "Ethan, I just wanted to say, I messed up. I shouldn't have done what I did." Ethan kept his composure and replied calmly, "We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after." Chase nodded, eyes low, too ashamed to say more. But that moment, however brief, was a step forward. That night, back in his room, Ethan reflected on everything. The humiliation, the doubts, the false accusations, and now, the redemption. He felt proud, not just of the win, but of how he'd responded to injustice, with integrity. Just like Coach Williams always said, a true champion isn't the one who wins in the water, it's the one who wins within. A few years had passed since the state competition, and now, at 20 years old, Ethan was reaping the rewards of a lifetime of effort. His performance in the pool had caught the attention of elite coaches, and he was officially selected to join the U.S. Paralympic team. Training intensified, international travel became routine, and the boy who started in a small community pool in Cedar Glen was now preparing for the biggest challenge of his life, the Paralympic Games in Tokyo. Arriving at the Paralympic Village felt like stepping into an entirely different world. The diversity of athletes, stories, and cultures created a unique atmosphere, one built on resilience and camaraderie. Coach Williams, who had never stopped being his trainer, looked around with pride. "Can you believe we started all of this in a little pool in rural Montana?" he said with a nostalgic smile. On the day of the 200-meter freestyle final, Ethan felt the weight not just of the race, but of everything that had led to it. He was representing more than just Team USA. He was standing in for every person who had ever been underestimated because of a limitation. The stands were packed, flags waved from every direction, and the tension in the air was almost physical. On the starting block, he looked at Coach Williams, who simply gave him a thumbs up. "You earned this. Show the world who you are." The whistle blew, and Ethan dove in hard. The water was cold, just as it always was. He stayed in control through the first 50 meters, but the competitors were fierce. At the 100-meter turn, he was in 4th place. Fatigue crept in. His arms burned, his breath came in gasps, and doubt whispered in his mind. What if I'm not enough? But then something shifted. He remembered Coach Williams' words. Swim like it's your last chance. Not for the podium, for the feeling of giving it everything. He caught sight of his coach's steady gaze at the edge of the pool, and it lit something inside him. Ethan steadied his breathing, found his rhythm, and tuned out the rest of the world. In the final 50 meters, he overtook the Russian swimmer just ahead. The American crowd began chanting his name. Every stroke now carried the weight of everything he had overcome. The taunts in school, the lonely hours in training, the doubt planted by others. A few meters from the wall, only he and another American swimmer remained neck and neck. The final turn was critical. Ethan launched himself forward with every fiber in his body, feeling his muscles scream, and in one final stroke, he reached with all his heart. When his hand hit the wall, he paused, breathless. Then the crowd erupted. He looked up at the screen. His name in first place, Ethan Parker, gold. The silence within him shattered with the emotional cry of Coach Williams, running alongside the pool with tears in his eyes. "You did it, kid! Paralympic champion!" Ethan climbed out of the pool, legs shaking, soul soaring. The U.S. flag waved as the anthem played, and the gold medal hung heavy on his chest. As he closed his eyes, everything came back like a movie. The bullying, the insults scrawled on his locker, the freezing community pool where it all began. Now he stood before the world, not just as a winner, but as a symbol of perseverance. At the press conference, a journalist asked, "Ethan, what does this medal mean to you?" He took a deep breath, voice steady with emotion. "This medal isn't just mine. It belongs to everyone who's ever been told they weren't enough. Every meter I swam was a battle, and winning here proves that believing in yourself changes everything. This is the victory of someone who chose to keep going." Ethan's words echoed around the world. His story went viral, and he became a symbol of hope and determination. TV shows, sports magazines, and even schools began sharing his journey. With humility, Ethan always said the same thing. The most important thing is to keep going. Even when no one believes in you, keep going. Back in the U.S., and the welcome was unforgettable. A crowd awaited him at the airport with flags and signs. Karen ran into his arms, holding him tightly. "You made history, my son." Coach Williams, standing behind them, smiled quietly. To him, seeing Ethan in that moment was the greatest reward of all. During the parade through Cedar Glen, Ethan was celebrated like a hero. In the crowd, he spotted Chase, silent, watching from a distance, with a look full of reflection. Ethan held no grudges. He knew his greatest victory had been against the fear and doubt that once tried to stop him. That night, with the gold medal in hand, Ethan sat by his bedroom window. Outside, the town was still celebrating. Inside, a calm silence surrounded him. He realized finally that he had nothing left to prove. His mission now was to inspire, to show others that even when the world shouts "you can't," there's an unbreakable power in not giving up. Ethan smiled. Because his greatest triumph wasn't the gold. It was that he never quit, and that no one could ever take away. After the Paralympics, Ethan finally returned to Cedar Glen. The small mountain town remained just as peaceful and welcoming as he remembered from his teenage years. After months of intense training and traveling the world for competitions, being home felt like a rare gift. Karen, his mother, was preparing a special lunch to celebrate the return of her champion son. As she set the table in the living room, she glanced out the window with a worried expression. The news said there's a storm front coming through. They say it might be the strongest of the year. Ethan didn't pay much attention to the forecast. He was too caught up in telling his mother every detail about his time in Tokyo. The races, the athlete village, the moment the anthem played, and the gold medal was placed around his neck. Karen listened silently, her eyes glistening with emotion. "My son, you did more than win. You honored every fight you've ever had to face." That afternoon, as he relaxed on the porch, Ethan watched the sky darken. Heavy clouds rolled in over the mountains, and a cold wind began to whistle through the trees. The forecast was right. Soon, rain came pouring down, followed by thunder that shook the hills and lightning streaking across the sky. Karen shut the windows tightly. "I hope this storm doesn't do any damage." As the hours passed, the situation grew worse. Emergency alerts began flashing across the TV and social media. The Flathead River, which ran through the lower part of town, was beginning to overflow. Authorities urged residents to move to higher ground. Ethan's phone rang. It was Coach Williams, calling from the community center. "Ethan, it's getting bad out here. The river's breached. Some homes are already flooded. The city's asking for volunteers. Can you come?" "Of course," Ethan replied without hesitation. He threw on his rain jacket and got ready to leave. Karen grabbed his arm. "Promise me you'll be careful?" He gave her a small smile. "Always." By the time he reached the center of town, the streets were already partly underwater. At the community center, Ethan joined Coach Williams and other volunteers setting up rescue points with inflatable boats, ropes, and flashlights. Families from the riverside neighborhoods were trying to salvage what they could as the water rose. Children cried, and the elderly trembled in the cold. In that moment, Ethan realized his gift as a swimmer would once again become a tool for saving lives. As he helped people board the boats, a desperate voice cut through the storm. "Someone, please! In here!" Ethan spun around. He recognized the voice. It was Chase, trapped inside a partially flooded home with his mother and younger sister. Ethan looked at Coach Williams, who nodded. Without wasting a second, he dove into the murky water and powered through the current toward the house. At the window, he saw Chase in a panic. "Ethan! Please! The water's rising fast!" Ethan remained calm, guiding Chase's little sister onto his back and swimming her to the boat. Then he returned for Chase's mother, who was crying. Finally, he reached out to his former rival. Chase hesitated, then gripped his hand tightly. When they reached dry ground, Chase collapsed to his knees, breathless. Ethan reached out a hand. "Come on, there are still more people who need help." Chase looked up, overwhelmed. I don't even know how to thank you." Ethan simply nodded. This wasn't a time for grudges. It was a time to act. The rescue effort went on for hours. Ethan didn't stop until everyone was safe. The community center became a temporary shelter. Mattresses, blankets, and food were handed out. Ethan helped with everything, organizing supplies, cleaning hallways, comforting children. In one corner of the room he spotted Chase, sitting alone with his head down. Later that night, Chase walked over, clearly ashamed. "Ethan, I was cruel, jealous. I spent years trying to bring you down, and tonight you saved my family. I'll never forget that." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "We all go through hard times. What matters is what we do after." The next morning, the town began assessing the damage. National Guard helicopters flew overhead. Volunteers helped clear mud-filled streets. Local newspapers ran headlines, "Paralympic champion saves families during historic flood." In the middle of all the chaos, Ethan remained steady, gathering dry clothes, hugging scared children, helping seniors sort through their belongings. A few days later, the town held a ceremony. Representatives from the fire department awarded Ethan a Medal of Honor. The fire chief stood at the podium and said, "You're not just an Olympic-level athlete. You're a true hero. Your courage saved lives. This is what real heroes are made of." Ethan fought back tears. That medal represented a childhood dream he'd never let go of, to become a firefighter. And somehow, in that moment, the dream had come true. He wasn't being honored for breaking records, but for protecting his people. That day, Ethan wasn't thinking about trophies or times. He thought about the boat rocking in the current, the child who held his hand in fear, and the relief of knowing they were safe. He finally understood what true victory looked like, making a difference when the world needed it most. Later that night, on the quiet porch of his home, with the gold medal in one hand and the Medal of Honor in the other, Ethan smiled. His mission had changed. Competing was no longer the goal. Inspiring others was. And to him, that was the greatest reward of all. After the heroic rescue during the flood in Cedar Glen, Ethan realized that his journey had already gone far beyond the boundaries of a swimming pool. The small mountain town, once proud of his athletic achievements, now saw him as something much greater than a Paralympic champion. He was living proof that courage, empathy, and persistence could transform not just lives, but entire communities. The following days were filled with honors, interview requests, and appearances on television. During one of those interviews, a reporter asked, "Ethan, what do you think is your greatest legacy after all of this?" He paused for a moment, then answered with conviction, "To show that the impossible only lasts until someone proves otherwise." That answer sparked something inside him, a quiet realization that his mission couldn't end with his last medal. One evening, during a relaxed kitchen conversation with Coach Williams and his mother, Karen, Ethan shared the idea that had been growing in his heart. "I want to help other young people facing limitations and prejudice. I want them to know they're not alone, that they can win, even when no one believes in them." And so, Strokes of Hope was born. The initiative started right at the community center where Ethan had trained as a boy. It offered swimming lessons to children with disabilities, but it went far beyond that. It became a space for belonging, resilience, and discovery. Ethan personally led many of the sessions, guiding drills, listening to stories, and passing along something far more powerful than technique: self-confidence. The impact was quickly visible. Children who once avoided social interaction now eagerly awaited class days. "My son never wanted to go to school. Now he wakes up early just to make it to practice," one mother shared, her eyes filled with tears. Word of the project spread. Donations began to pour in. NGOs, Paralympic athletes, and sports companies rallied behind the cause. As the initiative grew, Ethan expanded it beyond swimming, adding other Paralympic sports like wheelchair basketball, adaptive track and field, and sitting volleyball. "Sports aren't just about winning," he'd say during school and university talks. "They're about discovering who you are, finding strength in places no one thought to look." At one of those events, a girl named Sophie, also born without one of her hands, raised her hand, her eyes glistening. "Ethan, did you ever want to give up?" He walked over to her, knelt down to her level, and replied gently, "Yes, many times. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered why I started, and that gave me strength." The room fell silent, followed by a wave of heartfelt applause. That phrase would become one of the project's mottos. Over time, Strokes of Hope expanded to other cities. Ethan made a point to visit each new location in person. With every trip, he brought his story as fuel, to reignite hope wherever it had dimmed. You are not alone. You are capable, and your worth isn't defined by what you're missing. It's defined by what you choose to do with what you have. Recognized nationally, Ethan was invited to speak at international conferences, inclusion forums, and sports summits. Still, his roots remained strong in Cedar Glen. Whenever possible, he returned to visit his mother, chat with Coach Williams, and train with up-and-coming talent in town. "This is where it all started. This is where I'll always come back," he said with a calm smile. During a special event at the community center, Ethan was caught off guard. A group of young athletes had created a mural filled with photos, quotes, and drawings. "Thank you for showing us we're bigger than our fears." Ethan's eyes filled with emotion. At that moment, he understood. His greatest prize wasn't sitting on a shelf. It was the transformation in every life he touched. In a TV interview, someone asked, "Ethan, what's your next goal?" He smiled and said, "To keep inspiring, to help every young person understand that their limitations don't define them. That believing in yourself is the first step to changing everything." As the years passed, the project received international recognition and awards. But Ethan always said, "If I change just one life, every second will have been worth it." For him, the real gold was in the quiet impact, in the smile of someone who once believed they couldn't dream. One night, returning from yet another speaking engagement, Ethan passed by the living room and looked at the bookshelf. Between his medals stood a simple wooden plaque made by the children from his very first class. "Thank you for teaching us how to swim with our hearts." Beside it sat his Olympic medal, and the Medal of Honor he had received after the flood rescue. Karen appeared in the doorway, her gaze as soft as ever. "What you do goes far beyond sports," she said. "You teach people to keep going." Ethan smiled. "I'm just passing on what Coach Williams taught me, that the impossible can be beaten, one stroke at a time." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by all he had lived through, Ethan finally understood. His greatest victory had never been over opponents. It had been over fear, over doubt, over everything that had tried to keep him from becoming who he was meant to be. Now, every young person diving into that pool carried a piece of his story. And to him, that was the real legacy. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching this powerful and emotional story. We poured a lot of heart and dedication into creating every detail, hoping to deliver a message of hope and perseverance. Ethan is living proof that obstacles don't define us. What truly matters is the courage to face adversity and keep fighting for our dreams. If this story touched your heart, please share it with your friends and family. Let's spread this message of strength and inspiration as far as we can. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us which part moved you the most. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy impactful stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a single video. We have many more real, emotional, and inspiring stories to share with you. We believe every story has the power to change lives, and we hope Ethan's journey has motivated you to never give up, no matter the obstacles that come your way. Together, we can build a world where resilience and empathy are our greatest strengths. Thank you for being here and for being part of this journey. See you in the next story.